Pompliano joining us right now, sports, money, biz expert. He's got the Joe Pomp Show. Look it up, and does a great job on the writing side too. It's actually, how this all came about. Joe, first off, thanks for joining us. How you doing?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So I saw in one of your Substack articles a little FT shout out from one of the interviews that we did. And I'm like, hey, we should bring him on. So the name of the article was How the Dodgers Used Analytics to Become MLB's Most Feared Team, and how basically they got from being sold out of bankruptcy court to being the league's second most valuable franchise. So what else can you tell us on the research that you did?
Yeah, thanks for having me again, guys. The Dodgers are a really interesting story. I mean, if you think about what has happened over the last decade, I think it's quite remarkable. Everyone likes to talk about how they spend a ton of money, which is obviously true. I think they have nearly $1.5 billion committed to 4 players. So that's obviously quite a lot. But they also did it in sort of an unconventional way, too, where they hired Andrew Friedman. When he was hired at the time, the Dodgers were actually being out-attended. They had sold less tickets than the Angels for the first time in more than 60 years in Los Angeles. So it was quite a different time for the franchise than where they're at today. But he basically installed this process where if you go and you look at their careers page or their employees, it looks like a tech startup, right? There's like data analytics folks. There's this whole department that's been built out. And what I think he's done really well is he's identified these bigger name players like an Ohtani, a Betts, a Freeman, a Yamamoto, et cetera, which are worth the money, and they don't swing and miss on a ton of those guys. And then they do a fantastic job through the draft and building up the farm system, which is sort of difficult to do because they've traded for a large number of good players too. If you think about Betts, Darvish, Scherzer, all these other guys. So as you guys know, it's really difficult to trade for all of those people, but still maintain this great farm system. So really what it was just a shout out to obviously him and the department that he has built out, but also the ownership group in general. They paid, I think, just over $2 billion for this team almost a decade ago. And at the time, that was more than anyone had ever paid for a professional sports franchise. And most people didn't know if they knew anything about baseball because they were these finance guys, but they've obviously proven to put the right people in charge and have won some championships since.
I mean, I think they're doing okay. I think their evaluation has gone up. They've only won 2 World Series, been to the playoffs almost every year. I think the Guggenheim people know exactly what they're doing, Joe. I think they'll be fine. But is this an example of a team with all the money in the world just able to outspend people? Because why don't other teams do the same thing? They don't invest heavily in analytics and some of the people that you're talking about. Other teams could be able to do this. Is it just a matter of the Dodgers have more money, but also the Dodgers get better players than everybody else?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both, right? If you think about Friedman, I think he's probably one of the premier guys in the entire industry when it comes to the analytics side of things. I mean, you guys have had people on the show that have talked about how good the Dodgers organization is at not only collecting and analyzing that data, but translating it in a great way to the players for them to be able to make changes both before and after games, but also during games as well. So I think that's one piece of it. But then when it comes to the money, look, we're talking about a team in LA that has a 25-year local broadcasting contract worth more than $8 billion. So they're at a huge advantage when it comes to local media rights. And certainly a portion of that is spread throughout the league through local revenue sharing, but it gives them a huge advantage too when it comes to signing these big name guys like Ohtani. I mean, you guys were talking about it earlier on the show. I think Ohtani's contract is probably going to go down as one of the best contracts in sports history. And it might sound kind of crazy to say because they paid him $700 million. And how could you make more money on that? But the way it was uniquely structured and the visibility that he's brought in them and the extra revenue that he's been able to get them in the short term when they're only paying him $2 million has had a tremendous impact on the business of the Dodgers. And now it's been reported that they're making upwards of $600 million a year in annual revenue, which is far more than any other team in Major League Baseball.
So what do you think in terms of the impact that Ohtani's made? I know you're a numbers guy and we don't have it. I mean, AJ, I think you heard maybe before this said, he was talking to people out in LA who said he's making them upwards of $100 million just this past season alone, where they're getting all of these extra marketing deals and opportunities with companies in Japan as well. How much of an impact do you think that he's making on a year-to-year basis?
I think AJ's numbers are probably accurate. I've heard similar stuff. And if you think about it, there's a few different buckets that you could kind of group Ohtani in, right? If you look at tickets, The Dodgers led the league again in ticket sales this year. They were already selling out a lot of their games, so maybe he didn't have a huge impact, but anyone who's been to a Dodgers game, you know how many Japanese people are there today. Certainly ticket prices have increased, and everything that went on with the World Series in the postseason gives them extra money as well. He led the league in merchandise sales, along with Betts and Freeman being within the top 10 as well. That money is subject to revenue sharing agreements as well. But one of the secrets with that stuff is that you get to keep a larger share of the money when your own retailers sell the inventory. So that includes, the stores within the stadium, stores they own around the city, et cetera. So all of that money is additive to their bottom line as well. And then the biggest category is by far sponsorships. I think it's been reported that he added an additional $30 million plus in sponsorship revenue to the team this year. They signed 12 new Japanese sponsors. And it actually got so crazy at one point that these Japanese brands were going out and signing advertising deals with other Major League Baseball teams to get their inventory out there for when Ohtani came and played away games. Literally, they sold out of inventory so quick there weren't more options. So tourism is a big part of it as well. And I think he's had a tremendous impact. And look, if you're paying $2 million up front, but you're getting $120 million in return in year one, that number is going to go up over time if the team continues to perform well. And it's all money that is extremely beneficial to have today, given the discount that you can apply to that since you have to pay it out in the future.
Why didn't other teams get in on this? Like if you're looking at an investment that, yes, everyone's going to have to pay $700 million. Maybe some teams would have had to pay more to get him there. But it's not like we didn't know these numbers weren't going to be, they have estimates of how much you could make back. They're essentially, like you said, they're making money on this deal. Why were other teams not able to even offer this?
Well, I think a big part of it is probably that Ohtani wanted to stay in LA, right? There was obviously other teams that are interested, but his desire is a huge portion of that. And the other thing is that the $700 million number is sort of misleading, right? It allows the agent to go out there and say, we signed the largest contract in sports history. But at the end of the day, it's a $460 million deal. That's how Major League Baseball valued it from a time value of money perspective against the salary cap. So the number is significantly smaller than what was being reported at the time relative to what they have to pay. And other teams could have done it, but there's an argument to be made that he's not nearly as valuable in a smaller market as he is in LA.
Joe, I'm going to get to a more global question here. So you're much more on the outside in a good way than we are in terms of looking at multiple sports, right? We're doing baseball hours a day, every day. So when you look at the state of the league from a business component, you look at how the ratings just did for the Dodgers and the Yankees, how much the league made in general. What is your take on the state of baseball? Like, do you think there's a bit of a renaissance period going on right now with the way that there's interest with younger fans? And then the second part of that question is, with all that being said, because we always complain about this, why do we get all of the bragging around the World Series? And then as soon as the offseason hits, every story, every statement just about, except for maybe 2 or 3 teams, is we're broke, we can't pay for anyone. Is that just posturing in deals?
So the way to look at sports franchises is sort of difficult to evaluate how much teams are actually making money. I heard Mark Lazary speaking at a conference the other day. He's a former owner of the Milwaukee Bucks. And what he said was, everyone thinks we're making money hand over fist, but we were actually losing $100 million a year. And I think that's probably accurate, right? I don't think he's lying about it, but he ended up making a ton of money on the team because what you're eventually trying to do is just sell your shares for a larger amount of money, right? And there's a finite number of teams. There's 30 to 32, depending on the league. And the valuations have gone up because they're these scarce assets. So I don't think the owners are nearly as concerned or shouldn't be nearly as concerned about what's going on a day-to-day basis. Certainly that's part of it, but valuations are continuing to rise. The difficult part about baseball right now is that the local media rights have become less valuable. And I think that's where a lot of the frustration is coming from with owners, and some of these stories are coming from. Now, I think it's estimated that about half the teams in Major League Baseball have seen a fee reduction in local media rights, meaning they're making less money today than they were a year or 2 years ago. And that's certainly a part of it. But I actually think baseball's in a really good spot. The ratings this year for the World Series were fantastic. Obviously, having the Dodgers in New York are helpful to that. But the ratings were great. The ratings were even better if you include the international stuff with Japan. I think it averaged about 15 million viewers here in the United States, but internationally it was probably double that if you add in Japan. So that's all fantastic. But I also think baseball has sort of settled into this good spot, right? Where everyone sees it for what it is today. They produce a ton of attendance. Every single game is well attended throughout the United States. It's a great event to attend for families throughout the year. They have a ton of inventory, which is really great for broadcasters because they have inventory throughout the months. They can put the games on broadcast. They need more content. And then it's become a sort of a local ratings stalwart where fans within the local markets are watching these games every single day. So you have sort of a floor for viewership, which I think is great. And you have a ton of people attending games, which is primarily where they make most of their money. So I'm not nearly as bearish on baseball as a lot of other people seem to have been over the last few years. I think it's one of those things that has become sort of cool to say, but when you look at the facts and the money that's been coming in from all the different categories, it feels like it's quite the opposite today.
The part that bothers me, Joe, is when I read articles just now about the Braves, they're publicly traded and have to give you a lot of information, and I'm reading, this is definitely not my expertise, right? I don't have a finance degree, but I'm like, damn, they're making money. And I don't even see certain components that they own. And I know they're kind of a model franchise right now because they essentially own a small city, the Battery, all around the ballpark. But it does play into what I've heard many other teams have, which is a number of other businesses that feed off of their team, and those businesses are usually separated, especially if they become profitable. So we don't get that. Right? Like, am I off here or am I on?
No. Like, you're totally on. I'm glad you brought this up because it speaks to how professional sports organizations are changing. So the example I like to use is Mark Cuban, who owned the Dallas Mavericks for 20 years. He recently went on a podcast, and one of the things that he mentioned was, if you look at when he bought the team, I think it was in 2002. From 2002 to 2010, the franchise valuation actually went down. It didn't increase, it went down. They then signed this massive media rights deal, and franchise valuations escalated a lot in the last decade.
地元ファンだけでなく、日本やアジアからの観光客もスタジアムを訪れるようになり、チームのグッズ販売も記録的な売り上げを達成しています。こうした経済効果は球団全体の収益に大きく貢献しており、ドジャースは現在年間600億円以上の収益を上げていると言われています。また、ドジャースが大谷選手に支払う費用はわずか200万ドルにもかかわらず、その見返りとして彼がもたらす収益は莫大です。短期間でこれほどのリターンを生む選手は極めて稀であり、これからの数年間でさらにその価値が高まることでしょう。大谷選手の登場は単に契約の枠を超え、野球界全体にとっても画期的なビジネスモデルとなりつつあります。特にMLB の他の球団にとっても、このようなスター選手がもたらす利益や影響を再評価するきっかけとなり、将来的には他の選手たちへの契約形態や報酬体系にも影響を与えるかもしれません。それに加えて、ドジャースが抱える強力な地元放送権契約もまた、他の球団と比較して大きなアドバンテージを持っています。25年間で800億ドル以上に相当するこの契約は、チームが財政的に安定した基盤を築くための鍵となっています。この長期的な収益源があるため、ドジャースはトップクラスの選手を積極的に獲得し、他の球団に先んじてファン層を広げることができるのです。このような戦略は、アナリティクスデータ分析を駆使したスカウティングや、チーム全体のマネジメントにも生かされています。
Appreciate the time. Every team's stupid for not signing Shohei Ohtani. Definitely wanted to make that the point in resolution, in conclusion. But check out what Joe's got on the table. Some of these clips got a big following on Twitter and his show as well. You can find it. Just Google it. Thanks, Joe. Great to have you on here for the first time. Appreciate it, man.
注目が集まりました。大谷選手の契約がもたらす影響は、まさに歴史的なものと言えるでしょう。彼のような選手がドジャースに加入することで、球団だけでなく、メジャーリーグ全体にも大きな影響を与えています。例えば、日本国内での注目度が非常に高く、スポンサーシップの契約数も急増しています。ドジャースは、日本からの新しいスポンサー12社との契約を獲得し、チームへの収益がさらに拡大しました。
こうしたスポンサーシップは大谷選手の登場によってドジャースの本拠地以外の球場にも波及し、彼がアウェーゲームを行う際に日本企業が広告を出すほどの熱狂ぶりです。これは他に例を見ない現象であり、大谷選手の存在がどれほど特別かを物語っています。大谷選手が持つ影響力は単にグラウンド上の活躍に止まりません。彼の存在により試合のチケット販売も好調で、ドジャースの本拠地は常に満席に近い状態です。特に試合観戦を通じて地元ファンだけでなく、日本やアジアからの観光客もスタジアムを訪れるようになり、チームのグッズ販売も記録的な売り上げを達成しています。こうした経済効果は球団全体の収益に大きく貢献しており、ドジャースは現在年間600億円以上の収益を上げていると言われています。また、ドジャースが大谷選手に支払う初期費用はわずか200万ドルにもかかわらず、その見返りとして彼がもたらす収益は莫大です。短期間でこれほどのリターンを生む選手は極めて稀であり、これからの数年間でさらにその価値が高まることでしょう。大谷選手の登場は単に契約の枠を超え、野球界全体にとっても画期的なビジネスモデルとなりつつあります。特に MLB の他の球団にとっても、このようなスター選手がもたらす利益や影響を再評価するきっかけとなり、将来的には他の選手たちへの契約形態や報酬体系にも影響を与えるかもしれません。それに加えて、ドジャースが抱える強力な地元放送権契約もまた、他の球団と比較して大きなアドバンテージを持っています。25年間で800億ドル以上に相当するこの契約は、チームが財政的に安定した基盤を築くための鍵となっています。この長期的な収益源があるため、ドジャースはトップクラスの選手を積極的に獲得し、他の球団に先んじてファン層を広げることができるのです。このような戦略は、アナリティクスデータ分析を駆使したスカウティングや、チーム全体のマネジメントにも生かされています。また、MLB 全体の未来も、大谷選手の影響によって、さらに明るく感じられます。今年のワールドシリーズは、非常に高視聴率を記録し、日本や他の国々からも多くの注目が集まりました。これによって、国際的な関心がより一層高まり、若い世代のファンも増加傾向にあります。MLB は、野球ファンにとって伝統的なスポーツイベントでありながら、時代の変化に対応して、新しいファン層を取り込むための取り組みを続けています。このような新しいファン層の獲得は、MLB 全体にとっても長期的な成長をもたらす要因となるでしょう。私たちファンにとって、大谷選手のような特別な才能がどのように球団やリーグ全体に貢献するかを見守るのは本当にワクワクすることですね。彼の影響はプレーだけでなく、MLB のビジネス面でも新たな視点を提供しています。これからも彼がどのようにドジャースや MLB 全体に変革をもたらしていくのか、そして他の選手たちにもどのような影響を与えるのかが楽しみです。そしてこの MLB の未来や大谷選手の契約がどのようにスポーツビジネスに影響を与えるのか、皆さんはどうお考えですか？ぜひコメント欄でご意見をお聞かせください。また、この動画を気に入っていただけたら、ぜひいいねとチャンネル登録をお願いします。これからも MLB の最新ニュースや注目の話題をお届けしていきますので、お楽しみに。皆さんと一緒に MLB の魅力をさらに広めていきましょう。